Listen to that panel session. I think you're being entirely harsh on yourself and underselling yourselves entirely. I think it's the most interesting and most illustrative and interesting panel session with which to end this Global Financial Services Centre 2 conference. In fact, it neatly seems to me to dovetail in possibly a rather perverse way, ladies and gentlemen, because after all, we began this conference with Dan Gallagher, who was talking about his own Irish-American roots, and as he was saying, isn't it incredible how we can manage to travel so far in a relatively short period of time? In the case of only a few generations ago, after all, ladies and gentlemen, had his great-great-grandparents who first emigrated to the United States of America ever thought that their relations and their siblings would ultimately end up addressing a crowd in Dublin Castle, they were going to think, well, my goodness, there was obviously a crisis or a terrible event in the family. And in fact, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, that we finish this conversation today with a discussion no less of captives in Dublin Castle, which I do believe was a significant turning point in the history of the Republic itself. But indeed, we're discussing captive insurance. It just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, how far we have come and indeed how far our financial development has been over the course of this time, not just from the perspective of Ireland, ladies and gentlemen, but from the perspective of the world. And truly, I think, if nothing else, what we've learnt in the course of the last 2 days is the global, exciting and intriguing future that we have. Last year, we began this very, very exciting journey with this conference, and it's been a delight to welcome so many of you back again this year who were able to join us for that first event, and indeed to add so many new and interesting and exciting individuals and jurisdictions to this journey. It's been absolutely marvellous altogether, and I suppose, well, hasn't it been interesting to look at how many issues and how many, I suppose, dragons have been slain in the course of the last 2 days? Whether it's been the issue that indeed visibility and predictability, the rule of law, are the key facets that we need in order to promote and propagate our financial centres. The fact that offshore financial centres have been widely recognised not to be the problem by everybody, Jeffrey Owens included. We've had every sort of discussion, whether it was Barbara Ridpath discussing what actually managed to make a financial centre, through the ideas of Anthony Belchambers giving us the fact that actually there's nothing inherently wrong with the investment banking model. And indeed, we've had the whole interest in the perspective of even looking back one generation in the financial services centre model. Michael Minnelli discussing the fact that, 20 years ago we were looking at the idea that a financial centre was something that had to have a big financial hinterland. And then, of course, we saw Tokyo being, in many ways, the financial centre disappointment of the last 2 decades by simply not living up to that potential. In every possible respect, I think it's been an intriguing opportunity for us to, well, indeed, as Stephen Watts described it, or indeed Martin Crawford was describing it, finding the niche, finding your $1 trillion niche, indeed, as he was discussing, ladies and gentlemen, a most interesting opportunity in every possible respect. The whole point, as Pat Butler was telling us from McKinsey, is to stay flexible and offer yourselves the opportunities to modify your business model. David Green from the, a regulatory eminence, Grease, I think, in many ways, who's in fact at this juncture already on his way to Washington to address Congress, that of course the whole point is the most important issue for individuals is being willing to admit that you don't actually understand something which tied in very keenly with the whole concept we've had over the course of the last couple of days of the importance of non-executives, the importance of the fact that, as Jeffrey Owens put it, this was too big a crisis to waste. The whole issue, ladies and gentlemen, that tax may not have been a cause, but it certainly needs to be one of the aspects of the whole recovery for the entire global marketplace. There is a harm, as Alan Bashwin said of the Botswana Financial Centre, the harm of a race to the bottom, but nonetheless there is the opportunity to do so many things that manage to enhance within our financial centre environment, not merely the domestic environment, but also the environment for all of the foreigners as well. And therefore you can have a win-win for your domestic territory, as indeed Shauna was telling us about the position in St. Kitts. That was Shauna Lake, of course. Progressive income tax harms growth was one of the topics that was somewhat interesting, I think, to hear in a world where taxation seems to be getting worse and worse. And certainly it was magnificent to have not merely PJ Dehenahan's contributions this afternoon, but also those of his fellow Ernst & Young partner, Aidan Walsh, who offered us many, many interesting aspects looking at the whole world of securitisation. Ladies and gentlemen, whether it's been trying to accelerate the European construction, whether it's been looking at the whole idea of finding your niche business in Copenhagen, from Paris to Amsterdam, the humble giant of financial centres, whether we're looking at the idea of utilising compliance and risk technology in Edinburgh, whether we're taking the Invest Northern Ireland line, the whole idea of faster, quicker, cheaper, and manipulation to utilise things like cloud computing. Our friends from Ontario have brought us many key and interesting messages. I don't want to talk about the one in relation to snow shovels, because I think that's highly complex domestic domain information, which I'm sure is known only to Toronto. But we've looked at every aspect of Ontario, whether it comes from the simple aspect of dealing with winter through the BlackBerry and indeed to Islamic finance, and as well as that, of course, the Toronto Stock Exchange en route. And that, ladies and gentlemen, of course, surmises what Barry O'Leary from the IDA was saying. We need to be as agile as possible. Edward de Loncassang from Paris has been telling us that complexity was the consequence of globalization, and we must manage that complexity by single product. I have to say, for metaphor of the entire conference, I absolutely adored Deirdre Summers' composition about her 500-room hotels with the 50 occupied rooms and 35,000 people buying the coffee. If only we can sell them a slice of cake, ladies and gentlemen, that will be key. And that slice of cake, ladies and gentlemen, I think is something that we have to think about very strongly, because that encompasses the idea of educating our populace, of educating our usership, and also being able to create a much more lively and vibrant and exciting financial services centre landscape, which is something that I think has been melded together during the course of this entire conference. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, what a difference a year makes. A year ago, the United Kingdom's biggest concern was the non-DOMs. Look at them now, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, this has been absolutely, truly an incredible opportunity. I'm surprised they probably will be trying to repossess Dublin Castle as they try to find any possible chattel or asset they can manage to sell during the course of time. And of course now, ladies and gentlemen, we're in the world of reports, and we've discussed La Rosière, we've discussed Turner. It seems to be Turner is the new black, as it were, of the report world. And so, ladies and gentlemen, what can I do? Can I exhort you, first of all, that we are going to be able to have, I think, a brief glass of wine outside. I'm certainly having one. I was delighted to see, actually, the waiter is already in good form. He was trying to offer me a drink before I got back in here. That's what I call good Irish service, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, we must now return to our financial centres diaspora. We must take the message of the Commonwealth and propagate the message of positives we've learnt over the course of the last couple of days. And indeed, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot tell you exactly when and where we will recongregate for another of these conferences, but we will do so in the meantime by communicating, not by means of the Bush Telegraph, but indeed by means of Financial Centres International. To everybody on the organising team, Ken O'Brien, Valerie, Martina, Dustin, Yvonne, Tom and Louis, Ray and indeed Geraldine, my thanks for their organisation. And most of all, ladies and gentlemen, the last word goes to not only you for being a fantastic audience and our incredible diaspora of speakers from throughout the world, but also our sponsors, the Titanic Quarter, a name that I think is redolent the world over and also obviously very exciting for me as it comes from my home city. Ontario and Canada, who have done so well and provided us with that magnificent ice wine during the course of last night's reception. The Toronto Financial Services Alliance, who indeed brought us the ambassador to the Republic of Ireland last night, whose presence it was a delight to see, His Excellency Patrick Binns. Invest Northern Ireland, the IDA Ireland, Ernst & Young, and indeed also, of course, not forgetting the St. Kitts Investment and Promotion Agency and Northern Trust. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank them all. We thank you all. This has been Global Financial Centres International #2. Look and stay tuned for #3, but in the meantime, stay tuned with Financial Centres International's newsletters coming up soon. Thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen.